What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. So, the Feds just met here, and Federal Reserve President Jerome Powell took the advice of all the Federal Reserve presidents and will just made an announcement here. And I'll let you hear directly from the Fed and Jerome Powell here. Take a listen to what he said here about, well, I'll just let you hear it directly from him. Take a listen here.
Thank you, Betsy, and good morning, everyone. At last year's Jackson Hole Symposium, I delivered a brief, direct message. My remarks this year will be a bit longer, but the message is the same. It is the Fed's job to bring inflation down to our 2% goal, and we will do so. We have tightened policy significantly over the past year. Although inflation has moved down from its peak, a welcome development, it remains too high. We are prepared to raise rates further if appropriate and intend to hold policy at a restrictive level until we are confident that inflation is moving sustainably down toward our objective. Today, I will review our progress so far and discuss the outlook and the uncertainties we face as we pursue our dual mandate goals. I will conclude with a summary of what this means for policy. Given how far we have come, at upcoming meetings, we are in a position to proceed carefully as we assess the incoming data and the evolving outlook and risks. The ongoing episode of high inflation initially emerged from a collision between very strong demand and pandemic-constrained supply. By the time the FOMC raised the policy rate in March 2022, it was clear that bringing down inflation would depend on both the unwinding of the unprecedented pandemic-related demand and supply distortions, and on our tightening of monetary policy, which would slow the growth of aggregate demand, allowing supply time to catch up. While these two forces are now working together to bring down inflation, the process still has a long way to go, even with the more favorable recent readings. On a 12-month basis, U.S. total or headline PCE inflation peaked at 7% in June 2022 and declined to 3.3% as of July, following a trajectory roughly in line with global trends. The effects of Russia's war against Ukraine have been a primary driver of the changes in headline inflation around the world since early 2022. Headline inflation is what households and businesses experience most directly, so this decline is very good news. But food and energy prices are influenced by global factors that remain volatile and can provide a misleading signal of where inflation is headed. And in my remaining comments, I will focus on core PCE inflation, which omits the food and energy components. On a 12-month basis, core PCE inflation peaked at 5.4% in February 2022 and declined gradually to 4.3% in July. The lower monthly readings for core inflation in June and July were welcome, but 2 months of good data are only the beginning of what it will take to build confidence that inflation is moving down sustainably toward our goal. We can't yet know the extent to which these lower readings will continue or where underlying inflation will settle over coming quarters. 12-month core inflation is still elevated, and there is substantial further ground to cover to get back to price stability. To understand the factors that will likely drive further progress, it is useful to separately examine the three broad components of core PCE inflation: inflation for goods, for housing services, and for all other services, sometimes referred to as non-housing services. Core goods inflation has fallen sharply, particularly for durable goods, as both tighter monetary policy and the slow unwinding of supply and demand dislocations are bringing it down. The motor vehicle sector provides a good illustration. Earlier in the pandemic, demand for vehicles rose sharply, supported by low interest rates, fiscal transfers, curtailed spending on in-person services, and shifts in preference away from using public transportation and from living in cities. But because of a shortage of semiconductors, vehicle supply actually fell.
Yeah, so You heard it directly from Federal Reserve Powell, Federal Reserve President Jerome Powell. And they're going to keep hammering away at interest rates higher for longer. This comes as American credit card debts hit a record $1 trillion. $1 trillion here. Oh my goodness. $1 trillion. And also, the average credit card interest rate now almost 25%, according to Forbes, annually. That means you're paying 25% interest per year, every single year. Yeah, so that means basically every 4 years, you're paying the credit cards company or the banks 100% of the balance that you owe them just in interest. Just in interest. And you still owe them the balance. You still owe them the balance. Yeah, so every 4 years, you're paying them if you owe them just the average credit card interest rate of 25% now, let alone if you owe them more than the average. Unbelievable. This is like loan sharking 101, right? Every 4 years, you're paying them 100% interest. Yeah. No wonder we're seeing, headlines like this. Fed rate hikes don't just fight inflation, they hurt the economy over the long term. Yeah. Hiking interest rates aggressively, as the Federal Reserve has done over the past 14 months, doesn't just fight inflation by tampering down economic growth. Yeah, tampering down economic growth in the short term. The strategy also curtails the economy's output and growth potential over the long run by discouraging innovation, according to a paper set to be presented by the Fed directly in Jackson Hole. Our findings suggest that monetary policy may affect the productive capacity of the economy in the longer term. A slower pace of innovation may then have lasting effects. This suggests that the campaign could lead to a 5% reduction in output in the coming years. This study, however, doesn't conclude that the Fed necessarily should refrain from raising rates if needed to contain inflation. Rather, it suggests that increased government funding for innovation could offset the rate increases. But that won't happen because they're all concerned about the federal deficit. The 30 some, who knows how many 30s trillions of dollars of federal deficit we have now that is ever growing, but will some soon be 40 trillion, 50 trillion, 60 trillions of dollars. So with them all concerned about that right now, and them basically the Fed trying to send us into a recession by raising interest rates, they're going to foreseeably keep raising interest rates or at least hold interest rates high, basically trying to force us into a recession. And them not willing to the government's spend into innovation or because again this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the government deficit's high, we don't want to spend. And I mean, I get it, I understand the deficit is a concern, but it's going to be a concern for the foreseeable future forever, and it has been for a long time. I mean, back in 1990 our government deficit was 3 trillion. Now it's 30 some trillion, and this is a problem that's never going to go away for the foreseeable future. What do? We just never innovate ever again on a government level. See the problem here? Yeah. So we're definitely in a predicament. High interest rates for longer, which is sending our economy into a recession if we're not already in one, or at least hampering our economy, our U.S. entire country. 2/3 of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 50% of Americans go into retirement after working their whole lives with no savings at all, only having Social Security Social Security is set to run out of money in 10 years or less unless they fix it. And fixing it right now has a couple solutions, which having to do with raising the retirement age to age 70 or taxing people even more. The most likely solutions, there's not a lot of hope on the horizon. So, what is there to be done? Let me know your thoughts here in the comments. I'll keep you up to date here with everything. This is the stuff that the media doesn't really want to cover. I'll keep you up to date here. This is the cold, hard things that need to be covered, that we need to be talking about. Yeah. So make sure to subscribe down below. Click the bell icon if you haven't yet. Thanks for liking and sharing these videos. Click here to see a potential presidential cover-up, or click here to see new mask mandates that are already happening here right now in our country. Click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.